Town of Paxton's FY26 budget information session. Can everyone hear me in the back? I'm getting over a respiratory illness, so the mics go down, everyone's gonna have to move way up. So today is Monday, May 5th. We're at Paxton Center School. My name is Heather Monroe. I'm the town administrator. We're going to run through a couple slides this evening. It's going to be about 20 minutes worth of slides, maybe a little bit quicker without the presentation. We will put the PowerPoint on the website later, so if anyone at home or anyone here tonight wants to take a look at it, you'll have all the information available. And then at that point, we'll take questions. We have a number of town officials and school officials here this evening to try to help with anyone's questions that may come up, and we'll try to go through them in succinct order. So before we begin, or at the beginning rather, so some environmental factors. So some of the things we want to talk about tonight is just giving everyone a little bit of a background of where we are with the budget, the override, and the finances of the town. So one thing we look at when we're looking at our increases each year is percentages that expenses increase. So there's three areas in particular where the increase is disproportionate to the rest of our budget. And those are the Bay Path Vocational School budget, Wachusett Regional School District budget, and the Worcester County Retirement budget. So these are assessments that are handed to the town. These are ones we don't have a lot of input in. These are the amount that we are given and we're required to contribute for those services. Bay Path itself, since FY20 through FY26, has gone up incrementally. From FY21 to 22, it was about a $70,000 jump in 1 year. And there was even a high in 22 to 23 where it went up $118,000 in 1 year, which represented about a 37% increase in the Bay Path budget. In FY25 to 26 for the town of Paxton, it increased by just under $60,000 or 9.7% increase. So this is important. One of the things we talk about a lot and a lot of residents ask many questions about is something called 2.5%, which we'll get to in a little bit. But when we start thinking about the number 2.5% and some of these assessments that we have for contributions that we're required to pay into are increasing by substantially more. In some years, Bay Path actually was 28% and 37% increases just for the Bay Path budget. The next one we have is the Wachusett Regional School District. Wachusett Regional School District, along with Bay Path, together contribute to about 52% of the town's overall operating budget. So you have the town's budget, which comprises about 48%, and then education at 52%. Of the education, Wachusett is the largest component of the budget for the school side. And those increases have been high for us. So even though the numbers are much lower than you see for Bay Path, they are large figures. So in 20 to 21, it was a $286,000 increase. In 21 to 22, $326,000. And most recently, 25 to 26, it's a $572,000 increase or 7.4% increase from last year for us. And then the third one I want to mention is the Worcester County Retirement. So this is the state system we contribute into as town employees and as an employer for the municipality. And each year we are handed whatever the assessment amount is. The assessment is based on the salaries of employees as well as getting Worcester County up to be fully funded on their other post-employment benefit liabilities, which they're required to do by the year 2030, 2040 range. And the past couple of years, this number has fluctuated from a 4% increase, which was in 23-24, all the way up to a 29% increase last year for 1 year's assessment. This year, it's only $36,000, which represents about a 20% increase. Now, why are these important? Well, one of the things we talk about, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, is Proposition 2.5. So this is a question we get every year whenever we talk about the budget. Gee, I thought my taxes could only go up by 2.5%. Back in the 1980s, there was a law passed called Proposition 2.5. What that law stated is that the town can only collect, without doing override processes, underride processes, 2.5% more taxes than it collected the year before. That doesn't mean from one individual or one home. That means of all of the pool, of all of the properties that are in the town, and all the taxes the town can collect, it can collect 2.5% more from the year before that. The second piece to talk about when we're looking at that number is something called new growth. So this is something, if you watch any of the finance committee meetings, you'll see there's a lot of conversation about this during the budget season, especially when we're talking about revenues. And that's the additional taxes that are added to the tax rolls. So new growth can come from many sources. The easiest ways to think of it are someone builds a new house, or it's a garage, or it's an addition. So the first time one of these properties comes about and the value is added to the big pool of all the values, that's the fair and cash value is assessed by the assessor's office, we are able to tax that pool. And when we tax it and those taxes hit the revenue side for the first time, it's considered new growth. Over the years, municipalities like to see that new growth stay steady or actually increase because it adds to the ability of the funds that we're able to collect. Unfortunately, for the town of Paxton, our number hasn't always stayed that high. If you look back at the trends, in 2020, it was 120,000, then it dropped to 90,000, then 87, went back up to 96, in 24, 74,000, in 25, it was 76,000, and next year we only estimated to be about 65,000. This number is provided to the town by a certain date, usually early April, by the Board of Assessors office, when they review all the properties that are currently out there, all the projects and what they anticipate to pull in for new growth for that year. That's where that number comes from. The reason these two numbers are very important is actually when you combine them together. So for instance, in FY26, our estimated combined number between the new growth and the 2.5% is about $365,000. If all of our revenues stay the same, the state didn't increase our revenues, our local receipts were estimated to be the same, we didn't use anything else in the additional revenue category, and we just said, okay, here's the new revenues for the town, this would be the money that we would have to figure out how to deal with any additional expenses. So when we go back and we look at expenses such as Wachusett Regional School District, Bay Path, Worcester County, and we look at those numbers exceed, when you add them together, the $365,000. What that means is when they exceed that number, we don't have any more new revenues in this category to handle any increases in any of our fixed costs, like employee benefits, town insurance, or even contractual increases, or just operating costs for departments. And then we ending up having budget gaps. So in perspective, right, in FY21, so backing up a little, we had $346,000 that came in that revenue stream, right, the 2.5 of the new growth. And at the end of the day, by the time we took out Bay Path, Wachusett Regional and Worcester County, we still had about $43,000 to share with the town to be able to balance things. That was one of the few years we've been in the black in the past several years. In 2022, we were under about $133,000. So once we took out the schools, Worcester retirement, we were already behind the 8 ball by $133,000. FY23, we were in the positive again, $170,000. 24, $46,000 in the hole. 25, $158,000, and then 2026, $300,000. So one more review of these numbers because I think they're so important to keep an eye on. In FY26, so $366,000 between new growth and 2.5%. Wachusett Regional alone is $572,000 increase. So anything new we would have seen from new growth and 2.5%, we've already expended on the assessment increase for our Wachusett Regional School District, and we're already behind the 8 ball. Another thing to put out there, just so folks are aware, is something we know is inflation, right? FY21 to FY25, inflation for the United States increased by 19.5%. Put that in perspective, during that same period, the town's budget changed by 9.4%, Wachusett changed by 13.2%, and Bay Path changed by 95.8%. The next thing I want to talk about for a few minutes is just the FY26 budget process and how we got here. So for municipality, our budget process starts in the fall, and this year we did a kickoff meeting with the Finance Committee and the Select Board in a working group in October. There were a couple of deliverables that came out of that meeting. One was the budget calendar for the year to set the direction of where we were going. The second was the budget guidance, and this was a decision amongst FinCom and Select Board to have the departments prepare their budgets so that they did not exceed 2.5% increase over the current year's budget, and also provided them an opportunity to outline any expenses they needed to function and operate and run their department, but was outside that scope. And we used the form we tried this year called Out of Guidance. So all of those requests went there. They were not wish lists, they were not things that they wanted, these were things to maintain and continue operating their budgets that just didn't fit within that 2.5%. And then the third thing is a letter that came out that was authored by the Finance Committee, Select Board, and myself, and went to the school district. This is the first year we put this type of letter together. In years past, it was something that had been worked on by other town administrators amongst the district, but this was an internal Paxton effort. And what it was a statement that anything that was in the assessment that exceeded 2.5% of the current year's budget, we would be putting forward towards an override. So that number was agreed upon at the very beginning of the budget season. This is something that we spent a lot of time and had a lot of debate on last year when we got to the same point in the budget process. So we tried to get ahead of things this year and find a way to come to consensus to understand what the contribution and what the proportion of the total calculation of the override would be from the school side. After that, budgets were submitted, compiled, sent to the Finance Committee. Finance Committee held meetings, and then there was a joint Finance Committee Select Board meeting where a deficit override vote was voted on by the Select Board. The election date is set, which is next Monday on May 12th. Town meeting date is preliminary set for June 16th, which is a Monday, and then hopefully at that point we'll have an approved budget. FY26 budget summary. So we have the proposed budget, revenues totaling $16,209,541. Expenses estimated at $17,339,509, which has a deficit total of $1,129,968, or rounding up, $1,130,000. And the deficit split, as we just mentioned in the calculation, the school contributes, or the school side of it would be $411,791, the town side $718,177. Moving on to the revenue end. So there's 4 components for the revenue for the municipality. One we've already spent a lot of time on, which is tax levy. So that is calculated, mostly in mathematical sense, where we look at last year's amount of money for the real estate and the personal property taxes that we were allowed to collect. We add to that 2.5%, and then we add a new growth. And then we subtract from that something called overlay. Overlay is something that is controlled by the assessor's office or the Board of Assessors. They look at the 5-year average when we calculate that number, and that's money that's put aside for tax exemptions and abatements. The second piece, and that first piece, by the way, is the majority of our revenues. The second piece is the state aid and charges. So this is the money we get from the state each year, usually affectionately called the cherry sheet. And these numbers over the years past have gone anywhere between 2% increases to a little more than 3% increase. This most recent year, there was a little bit of an increase seen from the governor's budget, but by the time the state budget made it to the House, it's already been level funded. So these things constantly change and will change throughout the state's budget process as well as through our budget process. Local receipts. Local receipts are motor vehicle excise, motor vehicle excise, building permits, fees from the town clerk's office, all those pieces, bank interest put together. We generally look at those numbers and try to come up with a conservative estimate of where they will fall based on years past, trends, as well as making sure, when we're looking at having a healthy budget and generating something called free cash, that we allow some wiggle room to be able to generate free cash from those categories. And then last is the rest of our funds. So back in the fall, we had free cash from the year prior certified over $600,000. At that joint FinCom select board meeting, a little over $100 and something thousand was put aside to replenish two of our stabilization accounts, one being capital and one being operating. And then the remaining of that free cash, $500,000, was put aside to be put forward to the budget. And the last piece of other funds is something we've been doing for a number of years, and that's putting aside about $400,000 of our ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. Expenses, so when we look at the FY26 budget breakdown, you see my imaginary pie chart behind me. 52% of the pie chart shows one color for education. The next largest is 16% for public safety, followed by 10% for employee benefits, 9% public works, 8% general government, and then debt, human services, and culture and rec make up the remaining 5%. So when we look at our expense budget for FY26, the question we get is, what is actually in this budget? So what is included in the budget? Well, contractual obligations is a good starting point, and that includes all of the employee obligations through union contracts, personnel contracts, staffing levels. We have fixed costs, which are going to be, regardless of how many employees you have, you still have general insurance, injured on duty insurance, workers' comp. You have legal costs, you have your intermunicipal agreements, so you have your service providers for your animal control officer, you have regional dispatch, all of those pieces. Then you have level services, with a few exceptions. So one being we replaced cuts from FY25, so that included restoring a police officer position. It included restoring training, turnout gear, and other supplies for the fire department. Also line painting, materials, and other supplies for the DPW. We also are beginning a IT replacement program. We have about 40 devices, which up till now we've only periodically replaced some of them. As many folks may recall, watching the news and looking at insurance providers, one of the biggest hypes right now and focuses is cybersecurity, and that includes making sure that we have up-to-date technology and not outdated equipment, service life, and so forth. So this would begin replacing those devices over time so that we keep them current and modern. And then the last piece that's included that is, an exception to the level services piece is adding a MAP subscription. This is something we spoke about at one of the finance committee meetings. It's something a lot of assessors' offices are using. It is something called Near Map and Pushpin, and the combination of these two services actually has allowed a lot of assessors' offices to capture new growth that they wouldn't normally ordinarily capture, and also provides a tool for other departments within the municipality. So a lot of them are finding that when they invest in the funds for even the first year subscription, they're able to regain those funds back in a new growth in the first year. What is not included in the budget? There's no expansion of services. There's no new staff beyond the return to FY24 staffing levels. And there's no departmental wish list. When we look at the budget drivers, or what makes up a good portion of the budget for this year, $1 million can be seen in the following. So Wachusett Regional School District increase, $572,000. DPW, which again includes road paving, guardrails, materials and services, $134,000. Police Department, restoring the position that was previously cut, about $120,000. Fire Department, training services, turnout gear, other materials and supplies, restoring $79,000. BayPath, $56,000. Worcester County Retirement, $37,000. IT Services, $24,000. Regional Dispatch, $16,000. Regional Dispatch, this is the first year where we're responsible for paying 100% of the assessment. Up to this point, we've always either had only a portion or none of the cost passed on to the town because of the state 911 grant. So FY26, this is the first time we're picking up 100% of the tab. And then $15,000 for town insurance. So some general override information. The override amount is put forward at $1,130,000. That approximates to about $166 per quarter to the average single-family home value of $507,000. In order for an override to pass, it has to pass a ballot question and town meeting. Ballot question is scheduled for May 12th, and town meeting is currently scheduled for June 16th. One of the questions we've been getting a lot is what happens if an override is not successful at the ballot on May 12th. So the select board have a select board meeting scheduled right now for May 13th, which is a Tuesday, the day after the election, and they'll review the results that evening. They'll have a few options. If the override is not successful, they can decide to put another override question on the table and call a special election for a ballot. They could also decide instead to move forward with town meeting and look at reviewing the budget and making reductions. If they proceed with balancing the budget down, they'll have to do so to get it down by $1,130,000. They'd likely refer it back to the Finance Committee for further review. I would imagine the Finance Committee would revisit all the revenues, increase anything that's possible to increase based on most current up-to-date numbers, review all the expenses, and make recommended reductions. What happens if the town has to cut $1,130,000? Well, after revisiting all of the revenues and increasing every penny possible, then decisions would have to be made. There's a number of factors that go into this, and a lot of decisions that haven't currently been made. But you would be looking at cuts across the board, upwards of 20%, reductions to town-wide staffing, hours, services available, and potential restructuring of departments. Unlike last year, we don't have available funds to transfer. Last year, we went back after 2 field overrides to town meeting, and we appropriated money, wiping out a good portion of our operating stabilization account, or our checking account, as well as upping even more of our ambulance receipts to be able to balance pieces. Even with all of that, we were never able to restore 100% of what we had looked at cutting, and there were still cuts that had essentially been permanent still to today that we're trying to restore with this override. And that is all I have. At this point, the only other pieces are just, again, the town's website has a bunch of information on the FY26 budget page, and the email info@townofpaxton.net is up and running if anyone has any general questions. So that I'd like to turn it over to the public. If anyone has any questions, if you can raise your hand, and then we can see the right person to answer them. Dave?
our agreement with Anna Maria College to provide policing, campus policing for the college.
Speak up a little.
What I have here is the town's agreement with Anna Maria College to provide policing, campus policing for the college. It's a good agreement. It was signed in 2021, and it was signed by each member of our current select board. Paragraph 3C clearly states, Anna Maria College will pay the town monthly. What I have here is our revenue calculation sheet available on our FY 2026 page that Heather was referring to. It makes no mention of Anna Maria revenue. Actually, the entire FY 2026 page that Heather referred to makes no mention of any funds coming from Anna Maria College. I don't know about you, this is a total lack of transparency. Transparency by a select board who's asking us to approve an 11% override question. The only question I have, as I'm digging more and more, is what else is missing. So I'm going to plead to the select board to take immediate action to restore total transparency to our budget information and share with the public. Thank you.
Let's see. Anyone else in the back? Oh, sorry, Carrie.
I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the comment that just was made by Dave Blum, but what I want to say is the Anna Maria College contract is not part of the budget. It pays for the staffing and the expenses of the police officers who are on campus. It clearly states in the contract Army police officers and public safety officers are required, and all the funds that we receive from Anna Maria College on a monthly basis goes to a special revenue fund. It's on the town's website, and from that, the expenses are paid by an invoice from Anna Maria College. There's no surplus that comes to the town. That was never part of the agreement, and this has been ongoing for probably 15 years now, 13 years, right, about 13 years. And the transparency has been always that the police on Anna Maria College campus are paid by Anna Maria College. They're not giving anything extra to the town. That's why it's not in the budget, and the town doesn't vote on it.
I believe everything you said is true, Carol, except it's just not presented to the public. I couldn't find it anywhere. So if there is a web page on the town's website that presents what are we collecting and where is it being paid, that's all I'm asking for. So please help bring that transparency to the public. I'm sure we're all interested in that.
Good evening. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Mark Sebastian, I'm your police chief. What would a meeting be without talking about Anna Maria College, right? I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face over the last 2 years. I went through the budget, I went through how it operates numerous times. There's a group that has a conspiracy theory out there that we're not transparent. I take a little offense to that because it's my department. So I'm going to clear this up once and for all. Every month, we bill Anna Maria College. Anna Maria College then pays the police department, who drops the check off at the town hall. Our bills go to the town hall. My budget went to the town administrator last year. I don't know how much more transparent I could be, short of posting this in the paper monthly. It's not tax dollars, and there is nothing made from the police department. We bill them for the services that we provide. If you did not have Anna Maria last year to cover this town, when my budget was decimated, you would have had no coverage. So that project is a wonderful, wonderful partnership between this town and the college. It's been 15 years. I don't know why the last 2 years this has been coming up. It is track proven that it's a benefit to the town and to the college. Yet, like I said, some just won't believe that. And they think that there's some type of conspiracy theory here. I have offered numerous times to people, anybody, the public, the boards, the committees, you can come to my office. It's an open door. I will show you every piece of paperwork they have, every bill that we send out. Not one person has ever taken me up on that. So I'm placing the offer out there again. If you want transparency, come on up. You can have copies, you can have pay sheets, you can have anything you want that has to do with the college or my police department. Please take me up on it. I welcome you. Any questions directly for me?
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you share that information with Heather so she can put it on the town website so everybody
Yeah.
can see it?
Heather gets a copy. I gave her a copy last year. I can't give it this year. And I told that to the finance committee because until this override passes, I don't know where the Anna Maria budget's gonna be. Last year, based on the decimation of my budget, I had to move staffing from the town to the college. When I did that, I had to cut an additional person from Anna Maria. I couldn't go back to them because their budget was set. So I don't want to make that mistake again this year. So I explained that to the finance committee, and I'll explain it again here. As soon as that budget is approved, once I know where this override is going, I'll be more than happy to send it back into the town hall like they did last year.
The ambulance receipts on the revenue collection from the sheet has last year and this year's comparison. It has actuals from last year and has projected for this year. I would propose that we do the same thing here and disclose not only the revenue but the expenses and what's being paid for through that fund.
Okay, but it's Anna Maria's money.
And we could share that with Heather so it can be posted on the fiscal 2026 website for full disclosure for the public. That's all.
I'd be more than happy to do that. I just don't know how much input you're gonna have for a private college in the level of funding that they want to spend. But I'll be happy to share that like I did last year and like I'll do this year.
Is that something you can get done ASAP?
No.
As in starting tomorrow?
No, I cannot. I told you, until this override is passed, I don't know if I have to move staff from the town side to the college, which then inflates their budget.
Where we have actual numbers from last year, we certainly can close that,
You have last year's budget. I sent it to them.
but it's not posted to the public.
That's not for me. I don't have any say in it.
That's-
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is not getting captured on the camera for the recording, so if you could just come to the microphone.
The simple question I have is we have actuals from last year that are not available to the public. It would be a simple action for the select board to approve and Heather to do is to add it to the fiscal 2026 website on the line items that are referring to the actuals from last year. That's all I'm asking for both collections, revenues, and expenses.
Any other questions? Okay, have a good night.
Thank you, Mark.
Are there any other questions? Everyone has every answer they need? Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Up. Anyone else? No? All right, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.